I've got a lot of slides, so I'm going to cover a lot of things. I'm going to go through things in a fairly rapid format. I hope you're comfortable with that. I hope that this is beneficial to you and that you find some takeaways that allow you to think better about what it is that you're looking for in terms of finding a place for your child for school. My thesis is about this notion of a journey, that we want to take children from very young, eager children who come into school, in our case as 5-year-olds, to this path of a journey towards what we call self-actualization, critical thinking, problem solvers. Now, I got that from, in part, a conversation I had with my mother a few years ago, who said to me, she knows, of course, what business I'm in and what I do, but I don't talk to her too much about education and what it is that I do. And she asked me one time, she says, what is it that you want children at your school to graduate with, to have knowledge about? What type of people are you trying to develop or produce, or what qualities in people? And it got me thinking, that in many cases, that's questions that parents would ask, that they would be thinking about curriculum and facility and location and staff, but also, what's the ethos or culture or philosophy of the school? Because my child is precious, and my child will spend more of their waking hours with their teachers for 15 years than they will with us as parents. And so it's so critical that we have confidence in the educational system and program. So, I came up with this notion that, because I had heard it in a seminar recently, this notion of self-actualized. It speaks to a grander purpose, a noble design, that we want children to stand with confidence and authority and certainty, and have principled instincts and balanced viewpoints, and use reason and logic, and have some degree of self-esteem and happiness. All of those good things that we see in good people who we know. And this other part, this critical thinking, problem-solving part, came in conversation with my son-in-law. He is a software engineer. He worked, and still does, at a company in the Silicon Valley. And he was the first engineer hired by this company. And now there are 700. It's a hugely successful, very large company. And I asked him, what is it that you do, Steve? I'm like, what now do you do with all of the engineers? Because he's in management level. And he said, well, what we really do all day? We solve problems. We think collaboratively, we consult, we argue, we bring various viewpoints together, but we have to, every day, solve critical problems to move our enterprise forward. So my talk to you is a little bit about the school background and how there are common threads in the things that we do at school that bring us to this. From Yan Yan, who joined us as a kindergarten student, this picture taken on the very first day of school in 2016 when we opened for the first time. First time I saw a student wearing one of our school uniforms. And I took my phone out and I took this picture. She's now in grade 4, so she's a little bigger than that. But it's still a kind of an important picture for me because it speaks to foundation, to a starting point. And Daisy on the right, who joined us maybe 4 years ago, now in grade 10, and Hermione behind her, who will be part of our first graduating class as we move students into grade 11 next year and grade 12 the following year. But I digress. I want to begin with a little bit of background about who we are, where we are, and so some information pieces. We are located in Taipo. This is a government school building that our ESOL ownership group was successful in terms of a bid to get this school. 40 other groups also submitted bids and they were awarded it, and we completely renovated everything about the school. And it's really now a wonderful facility for us to work. The footprint is still largely the same. You would see a lot of these buildings in Hong Kong. That kind of that L shape with a separate sports hall and a little field in the back and so on. But we've done a magnificent job completely renovating the whole school. I've been in education for 40 years. I'm not checking my watch to see how long. I just want to be mindful of my time. And I worked in 9 schools. I know what good schools look like. I know what the research says about good schools. Often that's in sync or there's in alignment with that. But in those 9 schools that I've worked in, I've been in a leadership capacity in 7 of them, as principal or as assistant principal and the superintendent of education also for a long period. I came in Hong Kong in 2004 and thought that I would be here for 3 years. And I'm still here 17 years later. I brought my son, who was a high school student, who graduated at the Canadian International School, but now is married a very wonderful woman from Hong Kong, and we have 2 grandchildren, and I think they'll live here the rest of their life. And so my wife and I will retain certainly a long connection with Hong Kong. ESOL Education has been around for many years. You may or may not have heard of them, but you likely have not, because most of their schools are in the Gulf region. In Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in Egypt, and they just opened a new school in Bahrain. In fact, my colleague at the Canadian International School, Dave McMaster, just opened the school in Bahrain, their newest school. I've been to schools that are ESOL schools in Egypt and Dubai. They're large schools, very well resourced, lots of continuity in terms of staff and student retention, really nice places that inspired me to want to work for them, and I'm happy with that relationship that I have with them thus far. You measure the success of schools by many things, but one of them, this is important to some parents. Where do your graduates go to school? And this is representing some of the universities that ESOL graduates from the Gulf region have gone to in the past year, from graduating classes from last year. And so you see many fine universities in that list there. We started in 2016. We went from kindergarten, which is a 5-year-old program, to grade 6 and had 91 students. We went to 173, 223, 300. So good, solid, steady growth. This year, not as much because of the pandemic, the protests, a number of things are affecting a lot of schools in Hong Kong. But we're back, we think, on track based on admissions numbers for next year coming in, and so we think that will grow. We will add grade 11 next year, and then grade 12 the following year. When I started, we had 16 teachers. We're up to 42, so it's a much bigger enterprise. We first occupied the first 2 floors. Now we occupy 5 floors. Next year, up on an additional floor of the building. We are accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. And let me move this here. And the Middle States Association, which gives us the ability to or the right, call it, to offer the equivalent of an American high school diploma for those who graduate from our school. But we are also, we have candidate status with the International Baccalaureate, and we'll offer the diploma program. We expect to have full status this March when an accreditation team comes to the school to give us our final seal of approval. If you came to the school, I think that you would really get a strong sense of community, where the smile index is quite high. There's a very warm and welcoming and invitational environment at the school. And I think that in part it's because of our size. We're still quite small. It's in part because I hope that I've hired good people who really subscribe to this notion of in loco parentis, to act as a good person would in the absence of a parent, which is what I want our teachers to do all the time, to recognize that they're caregivers. We are educators, of course, but we also work with young children, and we need to be much different than an accountant, than someone who works in retail or something. We really have to really be mindful of the sacredness of those young children. And our program is very holistic in nature. We, of course, spend considerable time on intellectual development, but we also spend, I would call it, maybe equal time on the emotional, social, and physical and creative domains what a child goes through as they grow into these self-actualized critical thinking problem solvers. There's a lot of research about what are the qualities of effective schools. And I had told you earlier that I've worked at many and I know what good schools look like. I've also been the starting head or principal of 4 different schools. And one of the things that is of paramount importance is that you have a clear and shared focus. You know what your mission statement is, what your philosophy is, what your curriculum is, what your approaches to teaching are. And if you don't spend time on that, if it's not intentional and deliberate, it ain't going to happen by chance. So we spend a lot of time on that at our school. We have high expectations and standards, which is also very consistent with what the research says about the qualities of effective schools. And it's not just for your brightest who you want to get into a top-tier university. It's for every student on that continuum to move them, progressively to a better place so that they can be successful upon graduation. A warm and welcoming environment, facility aligned to best practice programs. This is an example of in that gymnasium when we inherited, it was a mess. It had a large stage that was quite run down, a balcony that made the room quite dark. We added all new windows, floors, ceiling, lights, air conditioning, everything. And it's a really lovely gym right now. Front entrance completely changed, all of the corridors and classrooms, and that's a look at one of the art classrooms there in the bottom right. We have a 7-floor building, and we completed ground 1, 2, 3, 4, and starting on December 18th, we will do floor 5, and we will add on floor 5 6 new classrooms, a secondary school library, a new music room, and a new office. And then the following year, we will do floor 6 and 7, which will be another cafeteria, more classroom space, breakout space, science lab, so lots still in the top 2 floors that will support our secondary program. The construction site here, there you go, is actually a park under construction. It was a car park up until Christmas of 2017, maybe 18. And we arrived after the break and saw that there were no cars there, and saw some signs on the fence and say that they're building a park. Well, it's taken forever to build it. And when I think of a park, I think if you put some sod down and some grass and you let kids run around on the grass. But this has lots of buildings. But I think it's going to be wonderful. And it's going to frame the whole site much nicer with new landscaping, new greenery, new facilities, a new fence around it. So we're happy with that. This shows our field on the bottom right there. A little bit about academics. We are, and I think you know why you're here, I hope, that we are an American school, very much interested in providing an international education program. Our approach to teaching and learning is very American or Western. The majority of our staff come from, I would say 90%, come from Canada and the US. We offer the diploma program in grades 11 and 12. No shortage of resources. I've just finished ordering supplies and materials for next year, which MISO requires us to do by the end of November. And a significant amount of funds have been put into that, which we're very happy with. I've had teachers who've joined us from other schools and said, I can't believe how many good materials we have in the school. So that's nice that there's no shortage of that. And this is an overview of the building. But it's also a segue or an introduction to my thesis, and that is this journey that I want to speak about. Self-actualization, I think it really is addressed in this statement here. And to me, the part that speaks loudly about it is this notion that there is this here, a morality, a creativity, spontaneity, and kind of problem-solving element to it. The person who has some sense of self. And that's what we're trying to get students to become and move towards. And for us, it begins with a mission statement. If you need to have in your school a clear and shared focus, well, you better start with a mission statement and what it is that you believe in and subscribe to. I have purposely put in goldenrod, highlighted those parts there that speak about independent critical thinkers and responsible global citizens. And I want to speak about this independent or critical thinking part in this manner. When I went to school, and I'm older than, I guess, everyone in the room, and maybe this might speak to your experience too, emphasis was put on knowledge. Acquisition of knowledge, remembering knowledge, preparing for state or provincial exams, doing well on those, and you could do well in university. Classes were large. The teacher was mostly engaging the class in a teacher-directed sort of way. We didn't participate too much. And now what we have in place in good schools everywhere is this belief that we need to move kids up this critical thinking pyramid so that not only do they acquire knowledge, but they know what to do with it, how to apply it, how to analyze it, how to make the good, tough decisions about things in terms of evaluating, and then at the top of that pyramid, creating. But it doesn't just happen by chance. You can't just say, well, we want to move kids up there. These are a series of what we call action verbs. So of things that happen every single day in classrooms everywhere in the world. Teachers, apparently people have done research on this. People who act as teachers give an enormous number of commands every day to children. And if you are stuck in the knowledge realm, you're going to ask a child, all right, name that for me. Find that. List that. Johnny, what are the factors affecting climate? Sir, I know that. It's ocean currents, it's winds, it's prevailing, it's proximity to large bodies of waters. Good, you know it. That's great. But if we want to move them into understanding what that means, we're going to start looking at action verbs that speak about justify, prioritize, contrast, compare, identify, and at the far right on the create cycle, design, invent, compose. We're moving them towards that critical thinking, problem solving. It starts at a very young age. These are the standards in place at our school that come all from the US. They tell teachers what children should know, be able to do, and communicate in every subject at every grade level. So again, it's not just about acquiring the knowledge, but what should they do with that knowledge and how should they communicate it? Again, supports us with that journey towards self-actualization. We have in our school a learner profile. Many schools would have that. We pay significant attention to that. Those qualities or attributes, I would hope, that as a parent, if your child graduated with a keen sense of those, that your child's school and you as parents would have done a good job bringing that child up. If your child was principled and caring and knowledgeable, confident, well, what do we do with these in the school other than hang them in banners throughout the halls or in the corridors or in the gymnasium? They are our aspirational attributes. They are what we believe in. They give us focus, not only in knowledge and skills, but also values and actions. So there's certain call it morality element to it in many cases. They provide us with this other part of our mission statement, which is a keen sense to develop global citizenship in students. But here's the key part. They are intentional, infused in our curriculum, embedded in our management, and measurable. This last piece, we're going through accreditation right now with the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. In fact, it's just finished. And they said, okay, we want to look at your learner profile. You say that you believe that you should teach children this, to be principled, to be caring, to be knowledgeable, and so on. How do you measure that? How do you know they are principled? So we have to demonstrate in very clear and certain terms, what are the activities, where is it found, what course, what grade level, how are children introduced to it, how are they assessed or evaluated, where there are gaps, what do you do to improve performance in that area? So I just want you to know that this is not just window dressing. It's a very important element of our school culture. The profile also shapes our commitment to service learning, our focus on international mindedness, our interest in providing experiential learning opportunities, which unfortunately right now are not being undertaken because of coronavirus and the pandemic in schools. Our pathways to growing independence. These are students who arrive at camp. Those tents aren't set up for them. They set them up themselves. When they go into the canteen for dinner, often they prepare the food, they clean up the food. We're always trying to get them to grow and independent. I stand in front of the school every day. Every day children get out of cars, and often a helper gets out with them, and the helper carries the bag. And I say, no, take that bag. You, Johnny, you, Billy, you carry that bag. There's a huge number of kind of symbolic means and measuring and communication devices and tools that we can use, and also very practical things like setting up your own tent that encourage kids to develop ownership and responsibility for their education and independence. Then a Week Without Walls overseas service learning trip. This is one of the highlights of the year for every child in the school, who go in the secondary school away for 1 week and live in community setting and work in an impoverished school or area and are involved in a significant project to support and help students in that school community. We also, if I can switch gears, we also move towards realizing that journey by the launch of a STEAM program. One of the things about STEAM, which is similar to STEM, which is similar to project-based learning, which is similar to the IB Primaries program, where you have children working together, collaborating to solve problems, to find solutions, to create something new. But one of the things that drives it is this understanding that innovation is key to moving things forward. Business, enterprise, thinking, economies. When it started in the early 90s in the US, it was known as STEM. And one of the things that many people in the United States realize is that they were for many years at the forefront of technical and scientific advancement and development, but were lagging, beginning to fall behind in many cases. And a number of think tanks determined that there was various approaches that needed to be adopted, and one of them that grew out of that was the launch of STEM programs at school. That we shouldn't just teach math in isolation and science in isolation after recess and math before. We should integrate them and see the connections between them and get kids to work in real-world conceptual lens framework to solve problems associated with math and science. And good schools do that. They still teach math and science, but they often combine them in this form of STEM. Well, a professor at the Rhode Island School of Art and Design said, well, you're missing one thing. If you don't have an arts or creative element, you don't take that scientist and allow them to really move it to the next level. If you ask an architect to design a house for you or a building for your business, the very first thing they're going to do is, after they listen to you and what you're thinking is, they're going to produce a sketch. So there's very much a creative, artistic element. So that was added to STEM to give us STEAM. And it's this approach to teaching and learning that leverages inquiry to design to guide development of 21st century skills. We use a design cycle. I'm going to move a little quickly through these. In teams, these students apply their knowledge, they interpret data, they form a design brief. They're working in partnership with others. We know that teams move faster, they find better solutions, they achieve better results, they learn to cooperate. And these skills, as determined by the World Economic Forum, are very clearly part of what kids develop at a young age in school if they're introduced to those types of activities in the school. So when my son-in-law says, we look for people who can solve problems, who can think at the highest level, they don't just become that way when they enter the world of work. Or they don't just develop those skills at university. We have to, in schools everywhere, launch that kind of mindset at a very, very young age with the type of activities we introduce to kids. Finally, a few slides on e-learning. Certainly, if you have a child who's in grade 1 to 3, you know that your life is going to change a little bit over the next 2 weeks because now school is closed. And if you have a child who's in kindergarten, it already changed for the last few weeks. Everywhere, schools are moving towards this, not only because of pandemic situations, they're doing it because it's another approach to teaching and learning that has long-term value. And the learning space has really changed, and we're incorporating digital literacy into so many of the activities that we involve our kids in right now. We're trying to move them along that critical thinking pyramid to that creativity at the top. And if we think of these foundational building blocks, the type of work that we do with students all the time in these 4 C's, we can take this base, we can add these components, and we can use various platforms, not only Zoom, but Google applications, classrooms, chat, Seesaw. Kids know all of this at a very young age. They are hugely tech savvy at a very young age now. The danger is that we overexpose and we spend too much time in this arena, and so we have to find a careful balance with that. But this is a really strong part of the school culture at American School Hong Kong. to finally the critical thinking piece. And that middle dot there to speaking to evaluate evidence, arguments, claims, beliefs is of fundamental importance. Putting all these together in many different ways, you can shape and build their understandings. So in conclusion, we have a mission statement, we have learner profile attributes, we have a STEAM focus, we have an interest in digital citizenship, and we are moving children from a very young age to become these desirable, self-actualized, critical thinking problem solvers. We are in type home, we have children in schools, in multiple classes at our school, in K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and single classes right now in 7, 8, 9, and 10. We will grow to 11 and 12 next year and add the IB diploma program. If interested in learning more about our school, please come for a tour or a visit or drop by our booth. Thank you. I hope I didn't go too fast. I hope this was helpful to you. I appreciate you spending some time with me. Thank you.